Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. Wanted to come on here and give you guys my thoughts on Arthur Smith and the current state of the Falcons franchise. Also want to break down a couple of NFL games that have me really excited. We're going to be talking Saints, Vikings, Browns, Ravens, and 49ers, Jaguars. Before we get into it, if you haven't already, make sure that you leave a like, subscribe to the channel. We go live Mondays after Monday Night Football, Tuesdays and Thursday after Thursday Night Football. So make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. You got post notifications turned on so you don't miss when we go live and upload new content. Remember that we're not just a YouTube channel. Every episode of the JT Sports Podcast is available on all podcasting platforms. Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from, you can find the JT Sports Podcast. If you enjoy today's episode, leave us with a 5-star review. We will greatly appreciate it. Helps the podcast out a lot. And share this episode with your friends, family members, and acquaintances. Arthur Smith is in his third season as the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. And right now, this team is 4-5, and they've been a really big disappointment. And without a doubt, he has to be on the hot seat. If the Falcons can't find a way to go 9-8 or at least have a winning record, he deserves to get fired after this season. Because I believe he's holding this franchise back. And not just him, but general manager Terry Fontenot, who also is in his third season with this organization. Look, I don't think the Falcons know what the hell they're doing. So how does it make sense that your past 3 first-round selections have been Bijan Robinson, a running back, Drake London, a wide receiver, and Kyle Pitts, a hybrid tight end wide receiver, and yet you're struggling to find ways to get these guys involved in the offense? What the hell was the point of drafting Bijan Robinson in the first round if you're sparingly going to use him? We already know that the Falcons had Tyler Algier, so why would you go and invest a first-round draft pick on a position that you didn't really need? In the first round, you should invest your first-round capital on players who could come in and contribute to the biggest needs that you have. The Falcons' biggest needs have been a pass rusher and a quarterback. You could have drafted Will Levis instead of Bijan Robinson, a guy who you're not finding ways to get involved in this offense. And then Drake London, he's a really talented wide receiver. He's not a bust. He can actually play. That's when he can actually have a quarterback who's capable of throwing him the damn football. But the Falcons haven't given him that. Same situation with Kyle Pitts. You know, the Falcons quarterback position under Arthur Smith has been abysmal. And it's been so bad that you got people who are trying to call Drake London and Kyle Pitts bust due to their lack of production, when it's not the fact that these guys are bust, because they are really talented. Kyle Pitts and Drake London can play. It's just that they don't have a quarterback who can get them the football. And you got to blame Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith. Going into this season, Desmond Ridder was announced QB1. And I was never a big believer in him. You see, anytime you have a quarterback that gets compared to Alex Smith in the year 2023, that's not a compliment. That's an insult. Having a game manager at quarterback, I don't think equates to you being a championship caliber football team. Why settle for good enough or average when you can go out there and get great? Lamar Jackson was a restricted free agent. All the Falcons had to do was pay Lamar Jackson what he wanted, give up 2 first-round picks, and they would have a major upgrade at the quarterback position compared to what they have right now. Who gives a damn about how much money he wants? When you got a chance to go out there and get an elite quarterback, you pull the trigger. You see, Arthur Smith, I don't think this dude is a god-awful head coach, but his play calling and the personnel decisions between him and GM Terry Fontenot, who's also in his third season with this organization, have been really questionable. You draft Bijan Robinson in the first round where you had the quarterback position that needed to be addressed. I mean, who cares if you already drafted Desmond Ridder the year before? Tennessee drafted Will Levis right after they drafted Malik Willis. And look where that got them. Now they got the quarterback of the future for their organization. Meanwhile, Arthur Smith in Atlanta continue to play musical chairs with the QB position. And going into this season, there was a lot of optimism around how good this Falcons team can be, because the defense has been really good. bringing in a new DC definitely has helped this defense out tremendously. But this offense has struggled. And it's not like the Falcons have gone up against any of the top quarterbacks in the league. The best quarterbacks that they faced have been Jared Goff and Trevor Lawrence. If you was a Falcons fan coming into this season, I'm pretty sure you were at least expecting to win 8 games or more this season, and you thought that with how favorable your schedule was, that you had a good chance of not only being able to be above 500, but possibly winning the weakest division in the NFL. But you've been held back by bad quarterback play and incompetent coaching. You know, Arthur Smith, sometimes I think his biggest problem is that he tries to outsmart the room 2 times too often. There's a game that I was watching, I forgot who they played, but he attempted a halfback pass with Jonnu Smith at running back. Jonnu Smith is a really good tight end. Don't think he should be playing any running back, and I don't agree with that play call. Why are you finding ways to get Jonnu Smith the ball at running back and not the dude who you invested a first-round pick into? And you got to remember, Arthur Smith is tabbed as a offensive-minded coach. Bijan Robinson, when he was coming out of Texas, he wasn't just a running back. This dude is a weapon. Same thing with Jahmyr Gibbs. You can line them up at wide receiver in the slot. They're not just primary running backs. Their skill sets are to the point where you can line them up any point or any part of the offense, and it can be a mismatch for defenses. But we've rarely seen Bijan Robinson lining up in the slot or lining up at wide receiver. The most that we see out of Bijan Robinson in the passing game is when they're utilizing him on wheel routes. That's unacceptable. Drake London and Kyle Pitts are solid players. It's just that they don't have a quarterback who's good enough to get them the damn football. The Falcons don't know what the fuck they're doing. Okay, Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot, if they don't make it to the playoffs this year, they got to get the pink slip because their draft decisions in the first round have not worked out. And it's not that these players are bad. It's just that they can't find ways to get them the football. And who does that fall on? Arthur Smith. He's the offensive-minded coach. Why would you invest 3 first-round picks over the last couple of years to guys who you can't find ways to get the football to? Arthur Smith is holding back the Atlanta Falcons. He definitely should be on the hot seat right now. And if the Falcons don't make it to the postseason, he deserves to get fired. He doesn't deserve a 4th year. Why does he deserve a 4th year? What, so you can give Desmond Ridder in year 3 another opportunity? Desmond Ridder is not good enough to win you a Super Bowl. Your goal shouldn't be, let's be good enough to make it to the playoffs. Your goal should be trying to put a championship caliber football team on the gridiron every single season. And Desmond Ridder, we've seen enough of him. There are Desmond Ridder defenders out there. Yeah, like, can you believe there are actually Desmond Ridder apologists out there making excuses for this dude when we saw this same quarterback get outplayed by Will Levis? Will Levis. Not too many people were high on him coming out. But Mayo, man, threw for 4 touchdowns and was looking like the second coming of Tom Brady when they played against the Atlanta Falcons. Desmond Ridder isn't even the best quarterback in the weak division. Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr, even Bryce Young have all been better than Desmond Ridder this year. The fact that people were coming into this season saying that Desmond Ridder doesn't have to do much, all he needs to do is take care of the football and hand the football off well, isn't a compliment. That just shows that you don't trust your quarterback. If you got to run the football a million times and you don't need your quarterback to do much because you don't have a lot of belief in him, it's because, for one, you know he's not good, and 2, he's not good enough to carry a team to a win. Think about the best coaches in the NFL right now. What do they all have in common? Andy Reid, Pete Carroll, Kyle Shanahan. Like, they all have competent quarterback play. Even Geno Smith, he's better than Desmond Ridder. You see, Arthur Smith, we get he's a really talented offensive-minded coach. But going into this season with Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heinicke was like tying your hands behind your back. They got too much talent on offense for the quarterback play to be holding this offense back. And the play calling from Arthur Smith has not been that good. You see, when you're going to invest first-round picks into skill position players on offense, you better make sure that you have a quarterback who's good enough to get them the football. If your mindset going into this season was, well, like Desmond Ridder can be okay as long as we don't ask him to do too much. That's a problem. And it's funny because the same issues that Desmond Ridder had this season was struggling to take care of the football, especially late in games, was the same reason why Marcus Mariota got benched last season. Isn't that crazy? It's funny how Arthur Smith in Atlanta made the same mistake with Marcus Mariota and repeated it with Desmond Ridder. Both quarterbacks can't take care of the football. You know, it seemed easy that all Atlanta had to do was run the football with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, but once we got to the regular season, reality hit pretty quick. This offensive line has dropped off. They're not good in pass protection. They're not really that great in run blocking either. This offense is a really huge disappointment, because they got some really talented players on this offense. Kyle Pitts is not a bust. But yet, you go back and forth with people who don't really watch the Atlanta Falcons who think that Kyle Pitts is, because they're like, damn, like, this dude was what, a top 5, top 10 pick, and the Falcons can't find ways to get him the football? He sucks. No, Kyle Pitts doesn't suck. The Falcons just can't find a quarterback good enough to get him the ball. Same thing with Drake London. You see, if you're going to draft skill position in the first round, you better make sure you have a talented enough quarterback to get those guys the football. Not everybody can be Kyle Shanahan. Not everybody can just plug and play anybody at quarterback and make it to a conference championship game. Arthur Smith obviously needed to address the QB position. Hell, even Deshaun Watson, regardless of how bad he's played for the Browns, he looks better than what Desmond Ridder has been up to this point. Taylor Heinicke, like, he's okay, but he's a serviceable backup. Low-end starter at best. He's not a guy who's going to be able to elevate you to a playoff level. It's disappointing how the Falcons have one of the most talented offenses in the NFC, but yet you look at their record and they're 4-5. Their most impressive wins have been against the Packers, the Panthers, the Texans, and Tampa. Anytime they played a team that's been considered to be remotely good, such as the Jaguars or the Lions, the games haven't been close. The defense has kept them in games, but that's not what you want to hear when you have an offensive-minded coach at the helm. You see, you shouldn't be saying, well, our defense is great. No, you should be saying we got a great defense and a great offense because our head coach specializes in the offense side of football. And you want to know what's a big red flag that you don't really have a great head coach? Anytime he specializes in a certain area of the ball, and that area of the football is the worst aspect of your team. The worst aspect of the Atlanta Falcons this season has been the offense. Last year was the defense, but even then the offense was mid at best. You go from Marcus Mariota to Desmond Ridder, and it wasn't really a huge upgrade. Marcus Mariota couldn't take care of the football in late game situations, and neither can Desmond Ridder. You don't need 3 to 4 years to figure out what you have at the QB position. If Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot are given one more year, they need to go out and draft a damn quarterback or make the concerted effort to go and trade for a solid one. Hell, even Kirk Cousins would be better than what the Falcons have had at quarterback ever since they pushed Matt Ryan out the door. They haven't found the suitable replacement for Matt Ryan ever since they kicked him to the curb, and they were right to get rid of Matt Ryan when they did because he was obviously washed. It was obviously time for him to hang up the cleats, but you gotta have a good successor when you're going from a guy like Matt Ryan, who damn near is a borderline Hall of Famer. That's what happens when you try to be too conservative and you don't go all in when it comes to the QB position. I don't know why people think the quarterback position is just a position where you can win with average to above average. You need great. You need superstars. Look at the quarterbacks who were in the conference championship last year. Outside of Brock Purdy, we had Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, and Joe Burrow. The teams who go the furthest in the postseason, most of the times are the teams that have good quarterbacks. It's 2023. People need to get out of this early 2000s, early 2010s mentality that you can win with an average quarterback. No, you can't. No, you cannot. You need to go out there and find you a superstar quarterback if you're Arthur Smith, if you get one more year. Even Ryan Tannehill, when he was calling the plays in Tennessee, Ryan Tannehill was a top 12, top 13 quarterback. That's good enough to make you respectable. But you see the Falcons, since they want to be conservative with the quarterback position and they didn't want to go all in on Lamar Jackson because, whoa, JT, we giving up 2 first-round picks for Lamar and we got to pay him all this money. It ain't worth it. What you mean it's not worth it? You mean to tell me giving Lamar Jackson the contract that the Ravens gave him and 2 first-round picks isn't worth it? I can't tell because you spent 2 first-round picks on dudes on offense who you can't get the freaking football to. Does that make any sense? That makes no sense. You spent the first-round pick on Bijan Robinson, and yet you're not going to give him the football. Oh, JT, well, we just can't be giving guys touches just because where they were drafted. Well, if you're not going to use them, why draft them? When you're drafting players in the first round, you should be drafting players who can come in and immediately make your football team better. You should be drafting guys who can have an instant impact. Drafting Bijan Robinson, it sounded good having a 2-headed attack, but you don't need a great running back to be a Super Bowl caliber team. You know what you do need? You need a good quarterback. And not just if you want to be a Super Bowl contender, but if you want to be a head coach for a very long time, guess what you need? Stability and consistent quarterback play. And that's something that Arthur Smith has yet to have since he's been the head coach of the Falcons, and he's to blame for it. And so is Terry Fontenot. Terry Fontenot should have told Arthur Smith, no, F that. Like, we finna go out there and get a damn quarterback. We don't care how much it costs. We don't give a damn how many first-round picks it takes. We're going to get us our franchise guy. Desmond Ridder coming out of Cincinnati was compared to Alex Smith. He's not great. He's a backup, low-end starter at best. A low-end starter isn't going to win you a Super Bowl in the year 2023 when we got guys like Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson taking over the league right now. It's the era of the quarterbacks, people. No longer are you going to be able to win a Super Bowl with a Joe Flacco. Look at the 49ers. They lost in the Super Bowl to the Chiefs with Jimmy G. You want to know why? Because Jimmy G wasn't good enough to come through and get the big plays for the 49ers when they needed them the most. Meanwhile, Patrick Mahomes gets it done in the big moments. Same thing with Joe Burrow. You don't hear those teams saying, man, all we got to do is run the football and ask those guys to throw the football as least as possible and take care of the ball and we be good. No, when you have a quarterback that you're confident in, you have no problem asking those guys to carry you to a win. Are Taylor Heinicke and Desmond Ridder capable of that? No. Desmond Ridder had a couple of okay comebacks against shitty teams, but what the hell has he done against good opponents? Bruh, Joshua Dobbs would be better than Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heinicke right now. Joshua Dobbs came in, only getting traded like a couple of days ago, and dominated against the Atlanta Falcons in the fourth quarter. You mean to tell me Joshua Dobbs can ball out for Minnesota even though he just got traded there less than a week ago? But yeah, you can't get competent quarterback play? There's a problem with the Atlanta Falcons when it comes to their decision-making, personnel-wise. They don't know what the hell they're doing. They got all these talented pieces on offense, but yet they can't find ways to get them the football because they stuck at figuring out how to properly evaluate the quarterback position. If the Falcons don't make it to the postseason this year or at least win 9 games, Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot deserve to get the boot. You don't need a 4th year because all they're going to do is do the same crap that they've done the last couple of years. Try to just find okay replacements at quarterback. You go from Matt Ryan to Marcus Mariota, that wasn't an upgrade. So you say, you know what? We're going to go from one of the worst starting QBs in the NFL to a quarterback whose ceiling at best is Alex Smith. Getting compared to Alex Smith in 2023 is not a compliment. Arthur Smith, he's holding this team back. Same thing with Terry Fontenot. I think if you're Arthur Blank or whoever is the owner of the Atlanta Falcons after this season, you need to reevaluate your staff and your front office and make some changes. And if that involves having some tough conversations and somebody has to lose their job, then so be it. But the fact that they want to play around the quarterback position, bring in trash Marcus Mariota, bring in mid Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heinicke, and think that they deserve a 2nd year, that's blasphemous. It makes no sense how much talent the Falcons have drafted in the last 3 NFL drafts in the first round and their inability to get them involved. If you're not going to find ways to get them involved, don't draft them. Draft positions that you actually need. The New Orleans Saints are traveling to take on the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are one of the hottest teams in the NFL right now. At one point, it looked like their season was over. But then they rattled off a couple of wins. They got back in the playoff hunt. And then a nightmare struck. Kirk Cousins got injured. And then you're like, damn, like, what's going to happen to our season? Are we done? Are we finished? Well, Jaren Hall comes in, and he looks pretty good, right? But then he gets injured. He gets knocked out early with a concussion. And then you got Joshua Dobbs, who just got traded not too long ago and balls out against the Atlanta Falcons. And you're going up against a New Orleans Saints team that they're on the 2-game win streak, but they're not that great. Okay, and yes, they are in the driver's seat of the weakest division in the National Football League, but, you know, the Saints are a 3-point favorite, and it really confuses me. Because they do got a really good defense, and they do got a really talented roster, but they don't play their best football against playoff caliber teams. And I think at this point, it's safe to label Minnesota as a playoff caliber football team. Now, do the New Orleans Saints have any wins against teams that have a record of above 500? I mean, they beating up on the Carolina Panthers, the Chicago Bears with Tyson Badgett, and the Indianapolis Colts with no Anthony Richardson, but they lost to any team that has a record of above 500 or competent quarterback play. The Jaguars, the Houston Texans, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They lost all 3 of those games. And Baker Mayfield has looked really good this season. Same thing with C.J. Stroud and Trevor Lawrence. So going into this game, you know, what can we expect out of New Orleans? Because you would expect, with Dennis Allen being a defensive-minded coach in the way that this defense has played up to this point, essentially being a top 5, top 10 defense in the league, that they should be able to shut down Joshua Dobbs in this Minnesota Vikings offense. Because let's be honest, Joshua Dobbs, to do what he did last week, really shouldn't be happening. Anytime you got a guy who just gets traded somewhere, doesn't really know the offense like that, doesn't even know the names of most of the guys who are starting, he should not be able to dominate the way that he did against the Atlanta Falcons. So if Joshua Dobbs comes into this game and he picks up from where he left off, that's a problem. A huge problem. The Saints are second in the NFL in points per game allowed. They have one of the best pass defenses in the National Football League, and they do a really good job at forcing takeaways. If you're not able to come in here and suffocate the Minnesota Vikings offense, that would be really concerning if I'm a Saints fan. Minnesota, defensively, I think that their defense is a lot better than what people give it credit for. Even though statistically they don't look all that great, they don't get off the field in third down situations consistently. But one thing about it is that Brian Flores, he gets a lot of heat on the quarterback. He sends all kinds of exotic blitzes, and it's really hard for you to get in rhythm if you're one of these quick game passing attacks. Derek Carr, he's played some okay football over the last couple of weeks, but he hasn't been great. He's been good enough. And if he gets outplayed by Joshua Dobbs, you know, it would be a really big disappointment. Derek Carr, you're paying this dude way too much money for him to get outplayed and outperformed by Joshua Dobbs, a guy who's looked pretty solid this year. Even before he got traded to Minnesota, this dude was having a pretty good season with the Arizona Cardinals, who don't really have that much talent to work with on the offensive side of the football. So for Minnesota, if you're Kevin O'Connell, what's going to be your game plan this week? Because Minnesota, they haven't really had the ability to consistently run the football, even though Alexander Mattison has started to kind of play a lot better than what he was playing at the first couple of games into this season. This just isn't a team that knows how to run the football effectively. And if you get into a situation against the New Orleans Saints where you got to throw the football to win, you could struggle. Even though you do got Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson, with the way this defense has been playing, it may be a little bit difficult for Joshua Dobbs to replicate the performance that he had against the Atlanta Falcons. And the Atlanta Falcons defense is solid, but they're not as good as what New Orleans defense is. New Orleans has a really talented secondary. Honey Badger, Marcus May. You got really good corners. Marshawn Lattimore. Like, one of my homies asked me, JT, do you still think Marshawn Lattimore is a top corner in the league? Absolutely. I don't know if he's top 3, but he's definitely top 5 or no worse than top 10. You see, Minnesota shouldn't be able to win this game against a Saints team that has a really good defense. Joshua Dobbs, he may come in and make a couple of big plays here and there, but he should mostly struggle for the most part in this game. And the Saints offense, they have way too much talent for them to just get bottled up by the Vikings defense. The Vikings defense has a really good DC at the helmet, Brian Flores, but they don't really have the personnel that he needs to run the style of defense that he wants to run. I'm still going to go with Minnesota to win the game, though. They got the advantage when it comes to the coaching staff. Like I said earlier, the New Orleans Saints haven't beaten a playoff caliber football team all season long, and I don't really think that's going to change. They got the head coaching advantage. Joshua Dobbs, even if he does struggle, I think that they can find a way to pull out this win. They are one of the hottest teams in the NFL. When Kirk Cousins got injured, they had the opportunity to say, you know what, F it, let's just throw the white flag and tank for Caleb Williams. But they're like, nah, F that. We are in prime position to make it to the postseason, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure we come close to being able to reach that goal, which I got a lot of respect for Minnesota for doing that, because a lot of the teams now are taking the easy way out where they just want to say, let's just tank and get ready for next season. I don't trust Dennis Allen. I haven't had a reason to trust Dennis Allen. And although you're in the lead of the NFC South, you're leading the worst division in the National Football League. There's a good possibility that the other 3 head coaches in this division all get fired. Frank Wright has been god-awful. Arthur Smith has held back the Atlanta Falcons. We just talked about him. And I mean, when you look at Todd Bowles and Tampa Bay, they went from 3-1, now the free fall mode. I like Minnesota to pull off this win and get the upset. I'm taking the Vikings 21-17. It's my final score prediction for this game. I believe that Joshua Dobbs finds a way to get it done. He may have a couple of turnovers here and there like he did last week, but he'll figure it out. They got TJ Hawkinson. They got Jordan Addison. They got a really solid head coach in Kevin O'Connell. And what not enough people are talking about is the coach of the year discussion. Kevin O'Connell, if the Vikings make it to the postseason, I don't care if the Lions have been irrelevant for nearly the whole entire decade. You go to the playoffs with a guy like Joshua Dobbs and injuries to 2 of your best players and Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson, you deserve to win Coach of the Year. I like the Vikings to win this game. The Cleveland Browns are taking on Lamar Jackson and the red-hot Baltimore Ravens. I believe the Ravens right now are the best team in the NFL. Yes, they don't have a better record than the Philadelphia Eagles, but you're not always what your record says you are. The Ravens are the most complete team in the National Football League when everybody's producing and everybody's playing up to the level of talent that they have. When their wide receivers aren't dropping the football and they know how to hold on to the ball for Lamar Jackson is really good. He's been phenomenal all season, and most people have him as the front runner in the MVP race right now. And not just has this offense been really good, but when everybody's executing on offense, this defense is doing the same thing as well. They got the number 1 defense in the National Football League statistically. You look at the Cleveland Browns. For them to win this game, you need vintage Deshaun Watson to play in this game. All right, you don't need Tennessee Deshaun Watson because that was his best game of the season when he went off against Tennessee. No, you need the Deshaun Watson that you thought you were going to get when you gave him $250 million guaranteed and you gave up all that draft capital to acquire him from the Houston Texans. Deshaun Watson needs to play the best game of his Cleveland Browns career if the Browns want to be able to pull off this win. They got a good defense. And the Ravens, anytime they play at home, they have annihilated anybody that they played in Baltimore. They annihilated the Seattle Seahawks last week. They annihilated the Detroit Lions a couple of weeks ago, and neither one of those teams were able to crack 10 points. Cleveland's defense is good enough that even if the Browns' offense struggles, it can keep them in this game, but it's not going to be able to win them this game. You're going to need Deshaun Watson to step up and find a way to get you to win, because there's a good chance that you may not have a lot of success running the football with Jerome Ford. And you have injuries on the offensive line at your tackle spots. Deshaun Watson, you're giving this dude way too much money for him not to be able to come through in a game like this. You need Deshaun Watson to be able to carry your team. Lamar Jackson, anytime he's healthy, the Ravens are always in contention for the 1 seed. And he also has one of the best win-loss records in the NFL since he became the starter of the Ravens. Lamar Jackson has shown the ability to lead the Ravens to wins even when the team isn't playing their best football, as long as the wide receivers can catch the damn football. That's the thing. When these receivers know how to catch, this is one of the most unstoppable offenses in the NFL. But the Cleveland Browns defense has been historically good. This has been the best defense that the Cleveland Browns have had in decades. And I believe that they should come in and have a really good performance against a Ravens offense that looks like they're clicking on all cylinders right now. You got Myles Garrett. You got a really good secondary. Your front seven is really good. They should be able to keep Lamar Jackson in the pocket. And although he has shown the ability to go to work from within the pocket, especially in the quick passing game, the Ravens are one of those teams that sometimes they tend to not be able to execute the way they should every single game. And if they have another performance like they did against the Pittsburgh Steelers, where Lamar's receivers dropped like 3 or 4 wide open touchdowns, there's a really good chance that the Browns could come away with the win. And even if the Ravens are playing their best football, I doubt that they put 30 points on this Browns defense. All they need is for Deshaun Watson to play like how he did when he was playing for the Houston Texans, and they can pull off this upset. But here's the thing. Are we going to get that version of Deshaun Watson? Because we've yet to see him. We've seen flashes of him. He was all right against Arizona. He was really good against Tennessee. Outside of those 2 performances, we haven't really seen anything out of Deshaun Watson to give us room to believe that, the old Deshaun is back. And they're going to need him. And not just do they need him to show up against Baltimore, but they're going to need him to show up against the Bengals too. You're going up against 2 of the 3-5 best quarterbacks in the NFL right now. This is a division that's considered to be the hardest in the NFL. You're not going to be able to survive having below average to average quarterback play at best. You need Deshaun Watson to get back playing his best football. You still got a really good group of wide receivers. And with how good this defense is, they can keep you in this game. The Browns defense is 6th against the run. They got the best pass defense in the NFL. Plus, they're really good at getting pressure on the quarterback. I doubt Lamar and the Ravens have the same performance in this game that they've had against the Detroit Lions and Seattle when they played those 2 teams in Baltimore. This should be a really exciting defensive slugfest. All right, the Ravens, if anything, they probably might look like the best offense on the field if Deshaun Watson doesn't show up. That's why you need vintage Deshaun to return in this game. The Browns aren't going to be able to win this game if they don't get high-level quarterback play out of Deshaun Watson. At what point do we start holding Deshaun Watson accountable when he's making $250 million fully guaranteed? You're paid like a top-end quarterback in the league, so why the hell can't you play like it? This is what the Browns traded for him for. This is why they paid him the contract that they gave him, because they need him to play at a high level. When you got to go up against Lamar and Joe Burrow twice in a year, you need also for you to have a quarterback that's good enough to rival those quarterbacks. If Deshaun Watson doesn't show up in this game and he stinks it up, the Browns have no chance regardless of how good their defense plays. Their defense is going to keep them in this game. I will live and die by that statement. I would be shocked if the Ravens put 30 on the Browns and their defense plays lights out. If anything, their defense gives up a good amount of points because they get tired because the offense is inefficient. It's funny how now you fix the problems on defense, but you still have lingering issues on offense. And maybe Kevin Stefanski just isn't that good as a head coach. The Baltimore Ravens, all you just need to do is execute. Anytime the Ravens have executed, they've won. And they've won big. Anytime the Ravens have lost, they haven't played their best football, i.e. when they lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They didn't play their best football that game. They left a lot of plays on the field. But when the Ravens aren't kicking themselves in the leg and they're not shooting themselves in the foot, they're the toughest team in the NFL to beat. And that's why I'm taking the Ravens to get the win. I don't believe that Deshaun Watson is going to show up for this game because we haven't seen this dude showing up in all the games that he started in for the Cleveland Browns up to this point, but two. I mean, cool, you should show up against Arizona. They're the worst team in the league right now. They're expected to have the number 1 pick. Tennessee isn't a playoff team. These are the games that you need Deshaun Watson to live up to the money that he's getting paid with that lucrative contract, and I don't think that's going to be able to happen. I got the Ravens winning 20-10 is my final score prediction for this game. The 49ers go on the road to take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. These two teams, their seasons are heading in two completely opposite directions. For the Jaguars, they've been the hottest team in the NFL. They've won 5 straight, and they're in contention to have the 1 seed in the AFC. Meanwhile, you look at the 49ers. They are on a 3-game losing streak, and shit is starting to hit the fan down there in San Francisco. You got their defensive coordinator, Steve Wilkes, who's on the hot seat. He's now going from calling plays in the press box to now calling plays on the sidelines. And a lot of 49ers fans and players are not happy with his play calling. And the 49ers defense, when you look at it statistically, it doesn't look bad outside of 2 key areas. They suck at being able to get off the field in third down situations, and they're not that great in the red zone. And expectations are really high for Steve Wilkes when you look at the previous defensive coordinators that he's replacing. Robert Saleh, head coach of the New York Jets. DeMeco Ryans, head coach of the Houston Texans. Both of those guys, when they were calling plays for the 49ers defense, this was arguably the most talented and the best performing defense in the league. But under Steve Wilkes, the defensive play has definitely dropped off tremendously. We haven't really heard that much out of Nick Bosa. It's like he got that back and just disappeared all of a sudden. Charvarius Ward, a cornerback who's getting paid a lot of money, keeps having a lot of big plays that he's giving up. And there's a problem with the scheme that Steve Wilkes is running and the personnel that the 49ers have in this scheme. This just might not be the perfect scheme for the players on this defense, regardless of them trading for Chase Young. It's no use trading for Chase Young if he doesn't fit well in Steve Wilkes' defense. And it's easy to put all of the 49ers problems and this 3-game losing streak on the defense, but it's not like this defense is giving up 40 points a game. I mean, they got carved up by Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow completed his first 19 passes against the 49ers defense. That's unacceptable regardless of how good of a quarterback Joe Burrow is, but I'm not going to come on here and scapegoat Steve Wilkes when this offense hasn't really performed at a high level neither during this win streak. Brock Purdy has been turnover prone, especially in the fourth quarter. He needs to play better. The whole entire offense needs to play better if they want to be able to take down a red-hot Jacksonville Jaguars team right now that's starting to hit their stride. They're playing their best football right now. The Jaguars have a really great defense. And you know what the 49ers' identity is on offense? What's the staple of San Francisco's offense? Running the football. Well, what does Jacksonville do great on defense? They stop the run. They're third in the NFL in rushing yards per game allowed. If they're able to slow down CMC, and this becomes a game where Brock Purdy has to lead the 49ers to the win with this arm, is he going to be able to do it? I don't think Brock Purdy is the second coming of Jimmy Garoppolo. Brock Purdy, although he's made some really head-scratching decisions late in games, for the most part, he's looked pretty good. Yes, he did struggle against the Cleveland Browns. I think we can all agree with that being the worst performance that he's had up to this point of his career. But against Cincinnati, he was making some really big throws outside of, the decision to try to get a little bit aggressive in the red zone, which backfired, and the other bad interception that he threw to Logan Wilson. Outside of that, he played a pretty good game. The thing with Brock Purdy is that it'd be 1 or 2 bad plays that hurt the 49ers. And you got to eliminate those. He needs to go back to playing mistake-free football. And then San Francisco, can't run the football effectively with how good the Jaguars defense has been against the run, you're definitely going to need Brock Purdy to take care of the football even more when you got a defense that isn't really playing at a high level, or at least the high level that you've gotten out of the defensive unit the last couple of seasons. The Jaguars, luckily enough for Brock Purdy and company, even though they're stout against the run, they're 30th in the NFL in pass yards per game allowed. They're really good at forcing takeaways. They're the best team in the NFL at forcing takeaways, but they don't really have a great pass rush outside of Josh Allen, Trayvon Walker. He's starting to come around, but he's still not playing consistently enough to really be that game changer that they envisioned him being when they drafted him #1 overall not too long ago in the draft. With the fact that their secondary has the ability to give up a lot of big plays and the pass rush not being consistent, Brock Purdy should have a bounce-back performance. Defensively, Steve Wilks is probably going to have his hand full. Okay, Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence, they've been going crazy this year. And you look at these receivers, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, they've been really good. Calvin Ridley, like, he's been up and down. I got him on my fantasy team. Like, I need this dude to continue to play the way he did in their previous game. I need Calvin Ridley to be more consistent. He needs to play the way he did against the Pittsburgh Steelers for the remainder of the season, because my fantasy football playoff hopes depend on it. Jacksonville, their biggest issues on offense is that they're not that great in third down situations, and they're not great in the red zone, which is crazy because those are the two areas that the 49ers defense don't perform well in. So who's going to be able to get the big stop on third downs, or who's going to be able to get the big third down conversions in this game? Are the Jaguars going to be efficient in third down situations against the 49ers defense that has been inefficient in third down situations? Are they going to be able to be more successful scoring in the red zone? You see, when you're Jacksonville, you can't afford to be leaving points off the field. If you got an opportunity to score touchdowns, you got to capitalize. And they haven't really done a great job at that. The Jaguars have been more of a big play offense versus being more of a methodical, efficient offense. That's why I got to take the 49ers to win this game. I think that the 49ers get their season back on track. I still think that this is a team that's more than capable of being able to win the Super Bowl. I don't think that they're frauds. I don't think that they're overrated. They just have to overcome a little bit of adversity. And being on a 3-game losing streak, that's adversity at its finest. And if you want to be a championship football team, you got to find ways to overcome when you're in a slump. They traded for Chase Young. He should play in this game because they're coming off a bye. So we should see him a good amount in this game. If we don't, that would surprise me. But even then, Javon Hargrave, Arik Armstead, Nick Bosa, they got to step up and they got to get after Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence and this Jags offense, they're a really good bunch, but they're not efficient. They're more of an offense that's relying on big plays. And if the 49ers can do a good job at limiting the amount of big plays that the Jaguars can generate, I think that that'll be the reason why they win this game. So give me San Francisco to win. I got them winning this game. 28-20 is my final score prediction for this game. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. If you enjoyed, remember to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Also, leave us a 5-star review. You can listen to the audio version of this podcast on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. If you enjoyed this episode, rate us 5 stars on Apple and Spotify. All you got to do is type in the JT Sports Podcast on whichever platform you prefer. You can give us a 5-star review that way, or you can go down to the description. There will be the links to the Apple and Spotify versions of the podcast. You can pick either one. Give us a 5-star reviews on those platforms. And I appreciate you guys for listening to this episode of the JT Sports Podcast.